Welcome to Impact Effect Podcast. I'm super excited today because we've got an amazing guest in the studio. And here's the thing. He's doing multiple things that are somewhat relatable, but also a little bit different. He's going to dive into how he brings impact into the world and leverages both of these skill sets and how he shows up and creates positive impact. So please let me welcome Noel Bagwell.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today. It's nice to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Brother. It's going to be a good convo.
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
As always, we ask one question. As we know, it's a two-part question, but we'll kick it off with the same question we ask every guest. How do you define the word impact and show up in the world and provide positive impact today?
Well, impact for me means the difference that you make. I like to keep it simple. So it's just the difference that you make. I think a lot of people focus on different layers of who they are in their approach to having an impact on other people. I'm a certified Neurolinguistic programming coach, and among other things, like you mentioned, I have my hand in a few different tills. So I write books, I do public speaking, I do the life coaching thing or leadership coaching thing, and I'm a lawyer. That's where primarily my income comes from, is practicing law. But in NLP, we talk about the different neurological levels, and you can think about this as like a core with concentric rings around it. The core is your identity. That's where connectedness comes from. And I think if you want to have an impact on somebody, if you want to make a difference to them, you have to have connection. You have to build rapport, and you have to have that connection with them. And around the core of your identity are your beliefs and values. Out from there, another layer of skills and abilities. Out from there, behaviors, habits, whatever. And then finally is the results and environment layer. This is the outermost layer, and that's the most superficial layer. But that's what people, when they talk about making an impact, that's usually where the conversation begins and ends. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think if you really want to make an impact on someone, you don't have to change their whole identity. That's maybe once or twice in a lifetime, someone's going to reach that innermost layer of identity, and it usually has something to do with their religion or something profound, right? So I don't think you have to reach that identity layer to make an impact on people. But you can even reach so far as their beliefs and values if you're just intentional about the effort. And that's what I try to do. That's how I show up to the second part of your question. That's really what I try to do, is build rapport with people, connect with them, listen to what their needs are and be sensitive to what their needs are, and then speak to that with an eye towards going as deep through those neurological layers as I can. Sometimes all the person is interested in is results, right? Just the results and environment. And not to diminish that in any way, right? But it really is the most superficial layer. Like if having an encounter with me or a conversation with me or doing work with me can change even your behaviors. I mean, we're one layer deeper, and I'm happy. If I can give you new skills or unlock new abilities, a phenomenal result, right? And if I can give you new perspective that shapes your beliefs and values, that's about as good as I think I can ask for. So that's what I do now. I do it in the various contexts of, public speaking and writing and coaching and practicing law. So a lot of that's very context dependent. You're not going to do the same thing the same way in each one of those contexts.
I told you we're going to have a good conversation today. The layers.
It's a thoughtful answer. I kind of pondered that on the way over. Like, how do I even go about presenting all of this in the short time that we have? But yeah, the layers. It comes from NLP wisdom.
With the NLP stuff, with interacting with so many people, high level, high stress situations, right? Being a lawyer, high conflict, you coming in and being paid to solve that or paid to mitigate or minimize or reduce it. Do you often peel back those layers with all your clients, or is that more so on the coaching side and writing books and trying to get down to that core?
I wouldn't be doing the coaching if it didn't come up in the legal context, I think. So I often tell people legal failures or challenges or what have you, they tend to start as leadership problems, I think. I think you don't often find legal problems without leadership problems. I started practicing law I started back in 2012, and then I started an exclusively business law firm, which was at that time called Executive Legal Professionals back in 2013. We rebranded a couple of years ago when I started doing the resilient leadership coaching. So now our brand is Counsel and Clarity because that's what we provide. And over the years, it was over a decade, as I practiced law with executive legal professionals, I was getting into conversations with clients where we'd start out talking about their legal stuff, but you drill down, well, why is this happening? Why are you encountering this challenge? Why didn't you talk to a lawyer in the first place? Like, why did you just wing it and hope for the best? Why didn't you have that preventive approach? Why didn't you take a proactive approach to your legal risks? Because, I mean, every business has legal risk, every single one of them.
Yeah.
Whether it's new employees, vendor relationships, customers, regulatory compliance. I mean, there's a host of things. Every relationship comes with its own array of risks. And if you're not proactive and preventive in your approach to mitigating those, sooner or later, it's going to catch up to you. And you're going to end up spending a lot more to dig yourself out of a hole than it would have cost you to not fall in it in the first place. So I asked, why? Why are you here? What brought you here today? It's kind of like when you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, one of the first questions they'll ever ask you is, well, what brings you in today? And I'm the same way. Well, what brings you in today? Like, you've encountered a challenge. Why? Why didn't you prevent that from happening? And the answers are often, at a superficial level, kind of sensible. But then when you start peeling back the thinking on that, it reveals deeper failures to lead yourself or others. And so I think the first level of resilience for any organization is building up the resilience in the leaders of the organization. So if you want to improve growth, if you want to improve stability, if you want to improve efficiency, if you want to improve profitability, you actually have to build resilience in your core leadership and cultivate a proactive and preventive sort of mindset among the leadership. And then it'll make the task of addressing your legal needs in a proactive way a lot easier.
It's almost like that thing where you build a SOP or an operating procedure after you've had a blow up or an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But in the legal world, that's a big blow up probably, right? Because you've got other people. It can be.
Mm-hmm.
But you've gotten to that heightened level where it's like, you can't solve it. Let me call Noel. Like, let me get him involved because this is just crazy. But that counsel and then that clarity. Talk about that clarity a little bit.
Yeah, so the counsel is, legal counsel. One of the labels for lawyers is counselor. And we often find ourselves in that role, and you get a group of lawyers together and they'll be talking about whatever. And eventually someone will remark something like, this is unpaid therapy, right? Like talking to a client, it's just therapy you can't charge for, right? Like, you're providing them human insight and based on your experience. And the more experience you have, the more you tend to do that kind of thing. I think obviously when you're first starting out, you don't have deep experience. Unless, like me, I came to the law late. I had a number of jobs before law school. I worked in luxury property management a couple of years in North Carolina before going to law school. And so I wouldn't say I had like a career, but I had a number of jobs and I worked for a variety of companies. And so I had a little more experience. Like, my best friend from law school is about 6 years younger than me. So I was a little older. Not the oldest in my class by a stretch, but certainly a little more seasoned than some of my classmates. Nevertheless, when I first got out of law school and started practicing, I wouldn't often have like deep, like leadership focused conversations with people. But as I've served as a trusted advisor to businesses for over a decade, about almost a decade and a half now, I feel like I've seen enough of what works and what doesn't to be able to really tell people this is something you should do and this is something you should avoid. The issue with the reactive approach to, oh no, we've had this blow up and now we need to update our contract so that we don't have this problem again. I mean, yes, that is something you should do at a minimum, right? The problem with taking that reactive approach, waiting for there to be a blow up and then addressing it, is that when the blow up happens, now you're focused on the blow up, right? Now you're focused on, uh-oh, now we have to solve this. And you fall into the trap of thinking, well, we resolved it. We updated the contract. Job done. The end. And then you have another blow up because you didn't really take a broad perspective. You're not constantly looking to improve Kaizen fashion, like this constant system of improvement and feedback. You're not really taking this proactive, ongoing, like open to learning kind of approach to the way you develop your systems and processes. Instead, you're just focused on that results layer, trying to get that revenue coming in, trying to not have an argument with whoever you're working most closely with, plowing through another day. And if something blows up, well, we'll address it at that point. People, I think they look at proactive problem solving as creating problems, which is kind of crazy because it's failing to proactively prevent the problems that creates the problems.
I was going to say that's the actual issue.
That's the actual issue.
Yeah.
And you're not creating problems. You're like, I don't have to worry about that. I don't want to create a bunch of problems. No, the problems are already there. You just haven't encountered them yet.
It hasn't, like, it's a small fire and someone hasn't come in and dumped gasoline on it yet.
Sure.
But just that little bit of gasoline sparks it enough, and then over here is on fire, over here is on fire, over here is on fire. Because right? Like in that setting with employees and offices and multiple locations, a conversation carries.
Mm.
Whether it's the truth or it's BS, it's going to get around, right? It doesn't even matter if it's in the LA office and you're in the Nashville office, right? Like,
yeah.
We know how that works. We grew up with the telephone game, right? Like, it's been a natural part of communication since we were kids. So to think that that won't happen is almost insanity to me as well.
Oh, sure.
You know?
Everything is narrative. Everything is narrative. And one of the most brilliant people I've ever known taught me that everything is intersubjective. So going back to your first question of impact, how do you show up for people? I think one of the beliefs and values that changed in a single conversation I had with this very brilliant friend of mine was the realization that everything is intersubjective. So I have a subjective perspective, you have a subjective perspective. It's like a Venn diagram, two circles, right? And they overlap to a certain degree. But we have to have the humility to accept that neither one of us has a direct bead on objective reality. And you'll hear people, their language will betray them. They'll say, well, in reality, this, or as a lawyer, in the contract says, but really, the contract says this, but what we really do is over here. And a lot of times, my job is just to simply make the contract match reality. It's like, what do you really do? And sometimes that means you got to change a little of the contract. Sometimes it means you need to change a little of reality.
I was gonna say.
Shift your practices a little bit, well, let's get this back into compliance and then let's have a contract that reinforces that. And now you've got a good path forward. But the intersubjective thing is such a game changer, realizing that, okay, I'm never going to see your perspective. No matter how much empathy I have, no matter how much compassion I have, no matter how hyper rational I am about things, I'm never going to see your perspective because I'm not you. Mm-hmm. I don't have your experiences. Doesn't mean that I don't care about your perspective. I just accept that that Venn diagram is never going to be completely overlapping circles. There's always going to be a bit in the middle. And I need to accept that, accept just the overlap and understand the shape of it. And understand that when we're working together, when we're talking together, whatever, all the impact that I can have is right there.
Where that alignment is.
Where the overlap is. Where there's intersubjective agreement, right? The overlap of those two circles,
Ooh,
that's it.
Intersubjective agreement. I like that.
Intersubjective agreement. What can we agree on? And you find a lot of relationships now immediately break down, completely break down. Because the two parties believe there's no intersubjective agreement. There is no overlap of the Venn diagrams of my subjective perspective and yours. I find that's very rarely true. And in fact, I think when people go looking for agreement, they find it. When they go looking for disagreement, they find that because both are always there. Both are always present. You're always going to have agreement. You're always going to have disagreement. The question is how much of each?
And what's your tolerance to how much of each? I think that's interesting because say that you have an opinion, I have an opinion, we come to that middle of the Venn diagram, but that's not enough for me to take action, to move forward, to pull the trigger, to do X, Y, or Z, or not do X, Y, and Z, right? And I think that tolerance of at what level are you aligned and on the same page can be high or low for people. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. You and I meet randomly, we have a conversation, we align on everything we talk about, and my tolerance is, oh, we're aligned, let's go, not realizing there needs to be a tolerance of everything we don't align. So we could work together, we could partner, we could collaborate, you could hire me, I could hire you, whatever that is. But I am excited because everything seems aligned and I don't have a tolerance to the respect the part that's not aligned. I think it gets very complex when people don't give enough time or breath with a relationship to see where it goes. And I'm guilty of this, like my hands up first, where I can engage with someone, have a great conversation, think everything's roses. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I have no tolerance to variation because we already talked about this. We agree, we align. And then here comes variation. And I'm like, I'm out, or this doesn't work. And I've got to get better on my internal perspective of just because this feels good, just because everything seems aligned, everything's in that overlapping Venn diagram. Well, there is a reality where they're going to pop out here. I'm going to pop out and think differently maybe here. Is this inner alignment that we're sharing inside that Venn diagram enough to carry me? And do I know enough about that person within that? I think I jump to that early on when I feel that alignment, and I forget that I have to have a tolerance for outside of the circles as well. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I guess you lost me at tolerance. I don't know if that's engineering tolerance, like the stresses of it, or if that's like tolerance as in I'm just putting up with things I disagree with.
Putting up with things I disagree
putting
with,
up with things
right? So we align, everything's good, great, and then I forget that there's that outer circle where we don't align.
When it comes to that, when it comes to putting up with things you disagree with, that level of tolerance, the other type of tolerance is useful to think about, like engineering tolerances. Like this can take this much stress within this margin of error, this tolerance. So I need to have engineering tolerance about your philosophical tolerance, I guess. I need to have a bit of maturity, a bit of a buffer there, a bit of inner resilience of mind, the ability to hold two conflicting ideas in your mind at the same time and not feel threatened, right?
It's impossible.
That's holding space. Is it impossible?
I would 100% agree that if my heart's tugging on something and my logic's telling me to do that, then it's impossible to agree with both. I think it's a head type of heart scenario.
I don't mean agree with both.
Okay.
I don't mean agree. So Mortimer J. Adler, in his wonderful book, Not Thinking Fast and Slow, that's Daniel Kahneman, How to Speak, How to Listen, he talks about listening to another person, and what that really is. And some of what he talks about we might call holding space. The ability to hold space for another person, to be present for them, entails hearing everything that they have to say, holding it within yourself, kind of cradling it like you would an infant. It's not your infant, it's not your baby, right? But you would still hold it just as gently as if it were, because it's a baby. Other people's ideas and their passions and all of that it's precious. It's them. It's pieces of them. It's shards of them. Holding that should be done with care and delicacy and strength. You're not going to drop that kid, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. It doesn't mean you have to accept the truth value of it. You just have to receive it.
Acknowledge it.
You have to accept it. And when I say hold two conflicting ideas in your mind at the same time, that doesn't mean you accept them equally or treat them equally. It doesn't mean that you're adopting that kid. You're just holding it for a little while. You're holding that child for a little while. You're holding that other person for a little while. You're holding space for them for the purpose of understanding them And until you can really do that carefully with gentleness and maturity, until you can really do that, you're never going to know how much intersubjective agreement you'll have. You're never going to know, like when you talk about tolerating things as like putting up with things you disagree with, you're never going to really know, well, have I given this full consideration? Do I really disagree with this? At first blush, you might think you do. Something might strike you as abhorrent even. But then when you sit with it for a little while, oh, yeah, this isn't so bad. Or I could deal with this. Maybe there's some reason, there's some rhyme and reason to this. And contextually, in the narrow context of the action that we have to do together, I actually can accept this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you don't really know the metes and bounds, sorry for the legal jargon, the metes and bounds, the limits, right? The full parameters of what's possible until you listen with an open heart, receive another person's ideas, hold space for them, accept it. There's understanding, there's acceptance, and there's agreement. And those are the three goals for any kind of conversation. Do I understand you? If I don't understand you, then the Venn diagram, we're completely apart. It's just like, I just don't understand that guy. He could be speaking a foreign language. I wouldn't know what he's saying. It doesn't make any sense. Understanding. Acceptance. Can I accept you? Can I have enough inner strength to hold a radically divergent view within me for a time without feeling threatened and destabilized by that? And until I can understand you and I can accept that, I don't even know whether or not I agree with you. I don't even know. So if you can't accept that dangerous, wildly different, scary idea or perspective the other person offers you, how do you know whether or not you even agree with it? And if you can't answer all three of those questions, how much of this do I, like if you can't even get to how much do I agree with, your impact, negligible at best. I often think too, like, are we really looking for impact? I wanted to ask you a question. You're asking me questions, but I'm maybe as a lawyer, I'm just used to being the one questioning people on the witness stand. But do you think most people really are looking for impact? Or do you think they're looking for equilibrium?
I don't think most people are outbound searching to create impact. I think most people are drifting through life to survive based on the expectations that they have set for themselves, based on, in this day and age, misinformation, I would actually equate that to. And I'll give you an example. I had someone that I follow on social that I know of. I see their content. We're friends, right? So it's not like there's this imaginary person I never met that I follow that's a guru or a celebrity, right? Like I know them. We're friends. And they're posting and they're doing all the things and they're crushing it. And I have them in the podcast studio. We go out to lunch. We dive into it and everything's falling apart. Everything's failing. And they're just focused on surviving. That's the state that they're in. And they said they've been in this state for about a year, right?
That's not so bad. Only a year.
I know. I was gonna say, yeah. I feel like it's been 7 for me.
Only a year of living in survival mode, huh? What a charmed existence.
And they said, at this point, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to get to the next thing. And what they want to do, where their heart is being diminished and swept under the rug because they're doing what they believe is going to bring in revenue to support their lifestyle, their habits, and ultimately themselves. That person, in one way, shape, or another, told me that they're doing the thing that their heart's not telling them to do to make money to survive. And I think that's okay in some instances, because if you do have a child and you don't have diapers or food, you may have to do things that don't align with your heart. But I think that a lot of people aren't even thinking about the question of impact. They're doing what they know, what's comfortable, and I call that drifting through life. So for me, I try to engage with people who can define impact, who can communicate that, who are looking for opportunities to do that in different ways, shapes, and forms. The person who comes in and says, yeah, I want to make impact, and talks to me about their balance sheet and how much revenue they made and all that, Okay, maybe they have impact, but is that really where their heart is? Is that really where their goal is? And I think you can have money and have impact too, but when the whole conversation's around dollars and P&Ls and this is going to get me here and there, I start to question that sometimes.
It doesn't feel like leading with soul. It doesn't feel like soulful leadership. It feels like the outermost layer of your mind and yourself of just results and environment.
You
You're,
said soul. I
Mhm.
use this phrase selling with soul.
Yeah,
And that's when I believe you believe enough in your product or your service that it creates positive impact to where you're not trying to sell someone something they don't need.
right,
You're leveraging your soul that's saying, I'm a conduit to this book that you wrote. I'm a conduit to this, and I believe it's going to help you and impact you in a positive way.
right.
I think that oftentimes a lot of sales professionals are in the process are trying to impact their wallet
Yeah,
and get the next sale. So when it comes down to your soul, it's like, are you selling with your soul? Meaning, do you believe wholeheartedly that this product or solution or service is best for this person based on what they said, what they need, and in most cases, what you've uncovered, right? Because some people don't know what they need or don't know what's available or don't know the options at hand. So I think if you do it with soul, if you do it with that criteria of, is this actually what this person needs and can create positive impact? Then I think you're living a life of impact. And I think I talk to a ton of different people. I talk to everybody. I'm an extrovert, right? So whether it's the waiter, whether it's the bartender, whether it's the person at the grocery line. And when people ask me about what do you do, I usually say I run this program called Impact Effect. How do you define impact? And most people can't define it.
Hmm.
And that's okay. But that tells me that if you typically in my life, and maybe other people are different, they probably are. I'm an odd bird. I'm not perfect by any means. But usually, if I can't define something, there's a very small chance that I'm actually doing it and I'm doing it at the level I can operate it at.
Hmm.
Right? I usually have to have an understanding. Now, there's stuff that I do and then I figure out, oh, there's a term or a word or, oh, that's what I've been doing. Right? So I get that piece of it, but I don't think impact is this vocabulary word that the world doesn't know or doesn't see. Right? I think it's just how they define it
Sure.
is
Yeah,
different.
yeah. It means different things to different people. English is funny that way. We have, a pretty expressive language.
I've had people say impact is about them and own it. And I've had people say it has nothing to do with them.
I think they're both wrong. The space of intersubjective agreement. If you're entirely self-focused, self-interested, your impact might be big and short, right? It might be like a big splash and then that's it. It's like a water balloon, right? If your impact is entirely others focused, it's going to be like a waterfall, but how big's the reservoir that water is falling from, right? It can just rain down and really pour on people in a nourishing and wonderful way, right? But if you're not replenishing that reservoir at the top, it's just going to run out. Like you need a self-feeding, like sustainable loop cycle where it's more like a conversation or a dialogue. When you talked about selling with soul, it occurred to me to wonder if you're not selling with soul, are you selling your soul?
I would agree with that 100%. And I often am faced all the time with that decision in business.
Hmm. Well, it's
Is,
never worth it.
am I going to regret this?
Yeah.
Is this make me smile? If I say this scenario to myself in the mirror and look at myself, am I going to like what I see?
Like
And
Marie Kondo, does this spark joy? Okay.
I just always go back to the mirror because
Mm-hmm.
in my life 3 years ago, I looked in the mirror, didn't like what I saw, and I made a change. And I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And that doesn't equate to money. That doesn't equate to I'm married now and I've got kids. Like it starts inward for me. If I'm happy and I can show up and harness that emotion and then work through negative thoughts, knowing that we have 60% of our thoughts are potentially negative a day, on average 80,000, that we're talking about 48,000 negative thoughts, right? So how does that happen? And how do I control that? It's everything I do. It's not just these one little pieces.
I don't envy the guy who did the study that counted the thoughts, sitting there with a little clicker. I'm like, would have worn his thumb out. 5 minutes. You couldn't do that. How do they have 48,000 thoughts? Who knows? I think
Who
a lot of
knows?
people sit there a lot of the time. So what are you thinking about? And that annoys me. I'll ask someone, what are you thinking about? Oh, nothing. Don't tell me that. You're thinking about something. Like, how often are people's minds just completely blank? And usually they're just like, it's stupid. It's a stupid thought.
Yeah.
It's not even a whole thought. It's like pieces of a thought
Hmm.
floating around. I'm interested in that. I want to hear about that. You mentioned another thing too. You said there's some people who just have to grind basically for the, I'm paraphrasing you, sorry. They have to grind for the paycheck because they've got mouths to feed. You know, there's so much purpose in that. There's so much meaning and value and purpose in that. The difference between it being soul crushing and nourishing for the person doing it is whether they understand that it is a loving sacrifice and whether they treat it that way and whether they're eager to get up every day and go drive a bus or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
go be a plumber. Well, I shouldn't say plumbers make a boatload of money now, but plumbers are doing quite well for themselves, I think. But to do a job that might seem trivial or mundane, there's no fame in it. There's no glory. They're not an Instagram influencer. They're not whatever, right? Whatever you imagine you want to be. I saw a survey that said something like 25 or 28% of Gen Z want to be Instagram or TikTok influencers or social media influencers. And I'm like, oh man, okay, well, they're young
There's more
yet.
money in plumbing.
Yeah, there's
There's
more
more
money.
money in plumbing.
Go be the plumber. Get
Yeah.
your hands dirty. The trades for now. I mean, I don't think robots are going to be up under people's sinks anytime soon,
Yeah.
so you're probably good as a plumber for a bit yet. But the robots are coming for the influencer jobs.
Yep.
They're coming for those first. So,
TikTok just released that you can have AI creators.
yeah,
So
okay.
your handle doesn't even need to be you anymore.
Yeah,
Like, and you can openly say,
yeah,
this is a person that I made up with AI,
yeah.
and that's the influencer that you can leverage. It doesn't even have to be a real human.
The question is that facsimile is projecting something. They're producing some kind of content, right? And what is it? What is the essence of it? Is it, and where is it resonating with other people? Is it giving them identity level nourishment? Is it nourishing their identity? Is it helping them shape their beliefs and values? Is it helping them develop new skills and abilities? Certainly it's impacting their behaviors because they're on TikTok endlessly scrolling that stuff. So at what level is it having an effect on them, and how lasting is that effect? I saw another article that said when you write with ChatGPT, your brain, like when you're done with the writing project, it just flushes all of that. That's it. It doesn't stick with you. You don't retain it. It's not earned in the same way that other education is earned, where you sit there and you laboriously pour through a book and you read and you have to absorb it, and then you have to learn to think about it constructively, and then you have to analyze it, digest it, and then you have to think, how do I want to talk about this? And we used to have the trivium model of education: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And my grandmother was a product of this education system. She only ever had a high school education, but you wouldn't know it. And when she passed, she was on her, I don't know, third or fourth iPad. She died 2 months shy of her 101st birthday. She was reading 10 books a week, large print, but still. And she would brag to me that she would beat her college professor friends at Words with Friends. And she did the crossword every day. Her education was superb, even though it was little country schoolhouse, because she followed this wonderful educational model that's been all but lost. And the grammar, like I remember at Christmas, she would recite Annie and Willie's Prayer. This is a poem that she memorized as a girl, and it stayed with her for decades. I mean, her whole life.
Yeah.
So, sorry. I think it matters how we absorb information. And I think we have to do the grunt work, or the non-glamorous work of learning to absorb it and hold space for information and ideas. Just absorb it, accept it without agreeing with it. If we can't do that very basic thing, You don't earn the right to do the next thing, which is think about it. The logic phase of the trivium model of education. You earn the right to think about it if you haven't absorbed enough raw data.
Yeah.
Raw data.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say facts because that kind of presupposes that they're true, right? But your friend who's going on, and posting a bunch of stuff on Facebook, and yet they're living constantly in survival mode. One is given to wonder, well, what's the quality of what he's putting out? There's certainly a lot of quantity there, but a lot of people would say, physician, heal thyself. How can you go and say a lot of things if you're not already living it in your life? There's a certain, I think Albert Camus said something like, some people have to expend an enormous amount of energy just to be normal, just to get to the baseline. I'm paraphrasing him too. I'm terrible with quotes. But I guess the point with all of this that I'm making is, don't fall into the imposter syndrome trap where you feel like you're just a fraud, but you do have to kind of pay your dues, a certain amount. Like you have to sort of have absorbed a certain amount of information, held space for other people's ideas, then learn to really critically think about them and think about them well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you sort of, back to the intersubjective agreement, you sort of know the metes and bounds of things. You sort of know, how much of this do I agree with? How much do I have a sense of what's really going to work? And also, how much wisdom and experience do I have with all of this? And at that point, the things that you say are more likely to penetrate more deeply through those layers of other people's minds from the results and environment. It doesn't take a whole lot to suggest to someone something they can do to make a little more money, right? That's a little, or you could have this result in your life. You could lose this weight, or you could have a cleaner house, or you could have a nicer car. You could have whatever. You can move the results that they're getting in the environment that they live in with not a whole lot of effort, really. To change someone's behaviors takes a lot more. You have to have more experience, more wisdom, more insight. You have to know them better. There has to be more of that intersubjective agreement. If you want to get down to like reshaping someone's whole identity, you have to have intimacy.
100%.
To get there, you need trust. And I talk about in my book, Lead Again, the 3 pillars of leadership are competence, confidence, and trust. And we've sort of been talking around these 3 things without saying them out loud for this whole conversation. And I think if you want to really have a deep impact, not the 1990s movie, disaster film, Deep Impact.
It's pretty terrible, isn't it?
Yeah. Elijah Wood gets married as a teenager to Lily Sobieski, and it's the end of the world. And yeah, so what a wild ride that summer blockbuster was. But not that deep impact. If you want to have like a real relationship deep impact with other people, you have to demonstrate competence, inspire confidence, have it in yourself as well, right? Know your competencies, be confident in them, and then inspire trust. And then cultivate that. You really got to cultivate it. Trust is earned. You can't just, how old is your oldest?
2.5.
2.5. Well, here in about 2 years, maybe a little less, they're going to start asking you, why? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? And if you look to that kid and you say, because I said so, right, you're going to have a problem as a parent. Maybe not immediately, because they'll respond out of, well, he's 10 times my size, of course I'm going to do what he says.
Fear.
You don't want that, right? But you also can't fall into the endless why. And what I think a lot of leaders, including parents, and every parent has the potential to be a leader if they cultivate that, if they learn those skills. What every leader, whether they're a parent or a CEO of a company or whatever, right, what they need to learn is, the reason you should do this is because you trust me, right? Don't you trust me? I love you. I want what's best for you. And if you really want to have impact, I mean, it comes down to that, doesn't it?
I'm going to ask you about your book.
Yeah.
You want to just dive into it a little bit?
Sure.
Just why you wrote it. That's really about it.
Oh, so it's called Lead Again, A Modern Guide to Resilience. And if you read the back cover, yeah, there it is. I designed the cover. The back and the front. But yeah, I like the phoenix rising from the ashes there.
I love it.
I've had a lifelong, complicated relationship with loss and grief and death. And I wrote that book because for most of my life, I handled those things badly. I handled loss very badly. I also I'm neurodivergent, and so I didn't really understand all of that. I knew I was gifted from a young age because my parents had me tested, but there are other aspects of it too. And I didn't really understand my own neurodivergence and the impact that was having on my relationships and why it cost me some relationships and things like that. Because I didn't, the Greeks say, know thyself. And I really tried. I made the effort, but I made a lot of mistakes in even learning about me. I chased a lot of potential explanations for why I thought things and acted certain ways, right? I chased a lot of those explanations and they led me down the wrong paths. And so I didn't really have a good understanding of myself until after my wife left. I mean, despite really trying, like I have an undergraduate degree in philosophy. I've explored life's deep questions. I've worked hard. I've done the work. I've paid my dues. But it wasn't
You have a depth of knowledge that most people don't in multiple different avenues of life and business.
well,
Based on our friendship and
yeah.
interaction so far, like that's the one thing that if I when we went out to dinner or lunch or caught up and hung out, and it was like I came back and I was like, man, he's gifted. Like you just haven't. There's a depth there. It's not this surface level. Like Noel's not the Chat GPT and can't cash that check, right? Like he's thinking with depth. He's getting perspective. He's making I wouldn't even say an assumption because at that point he's looked at all the angles, right? But you make your own assertion of that information.
Sure. Always open to being wrong.
But there's depth there, right? Like it's not this surface level. Oh, I threw this in the Chat GPT. Let me go create some content about it.
Right.
And then when people ask me about it in the DMs, I can't cash the check, right? Like I don't have the depth.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
No, well, that's a very kind compliment. Thank you. The giftedness thing it's not a flex. It's a blessing and a curse. When you're going back to the intersubjective agreement, I mean, that's just everything in this conversation, apparently. The understanding, sometimes it's too far apart. They misunderstand me, and I misunderstand them. I misread social cues, whatever. They misunderstand the things that I say for either social reasons or cognitive reasons, or not trusting my intentions or whatever the case may be. I find myself frequently deeply misunderstood, and that grieves me. And for a long time, I just didn't get why. And sometimes I still don't, a little bit. But the relationship with loss was traumatic. Like I had early childhood losses, I had adolescent losses, and they were really profound. Those traumas set me back, even more so because of the neurodivergence. So, like Camus, saying some people have to put forth maximum effort just to be normal. Like a lot of my life has been just trying to be normal and have normal human relationships because I deeply love my family, the people in my life. Like when I let someone in, I let them all the way in, all the way into the level of identity. Like I define myself in relationship to other people. So I lost two what you might call emotional co-regulators in the same month within 15 days of each other.
Wow.
Like my grandmother was someone that when everything felt like it was burning down around me, I could go to her and I felt safe. I felt okay. And my wife, over 15 years of marriage, she also became an emotional co-regulator. Like when I felt misunderstood or like things weren't working or whatever, I would think, well, at least I have this. At least my wife, she's promised to love, honor, and obey. Like we're in this forever, and I'm gonna love, honor, and cherish her forever, and still death do us part. For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, no matter what, till death. At least I have that. At least I have her, and we'll get through it together. So my grandmother died August 4th of 21, and my wife blindsided me with divorce on August 19th. Same year, same month, 15 days apart. Both of the people that most made me feel safe in the world were gone out of my life with no explanation really, certainly no warning. And it burned me down to the basement level in my life. There were only two things left: my faith and fatherhood. Everything else didn't mean anything. Food tasted like sand in my mouth. I lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, couldn't function. And God just brought some wonderful people into my life. God brought into my life a lady named Katrina Elkins, and she introduced me to a man named Matt Corlett. And they both were really supportive of me. Matt coached me. He taught me to do the coaching thing that I do now. He's the one who encouraged me to study neurolinguistic programming, which a lot of people, let's just be real, it's considered by mainstream psychologists to be pseudoscience kind of stuff, but it's hard to argue with results. And from a coaching perspective, it really works, and it's worked for me. It's helped me. So it's not for everybody, but for the people that it works for them. And again, hard to argue with results. I started working with these people. I got a spiritual director, a priest that I trusted. Eventually, I sat and had an evaluation with a psychologist to see what was banging around in there, right? Rule out any of like personality disorders or anything like that. And so I don't have any of that. I don't have like personality disorders or anything like that. But it was this whole like 2-year span where I had been completely dysregulated, completely like burned down and casting about. And all I had to anchor me was my faith and my son and these lovely people who were in my life, probably 10 of them all together, like a support team, right? My best friend from law school, Bradley, he was there for me. My dear friend, Ryan, just really close friends, people I consider like a brother.
Yeah.
Right? They poured in a lot of love and support to my life. And I learned a lot for those 2 years. And I put what I learned in the book. And it was, I think at some point, I'm not sure how conscious it was almost like a subconscious or an instinct impulse, right? I had started to write a book called Profit from Legal about my legal practice and how you can improve your profitability by, having legal support, and that legal doesn't have to be a hole that you just throw money into, right? But I shelved that book entirely. I still haven't finished it. And I poured it into Lead Again. And what I wanted Lead Again to be is kind of breadcrumbs, like a map back from catastrophic loss. So I went through all of that gut-wrenching, like soul-crushing loss. And I thought, I've been here before. I've been to the depths of loss before and grief. I've been here. But every time I've tried to come back from it, I've done that badly. This time I'm going to get it right. This time I'm going to learn to lead myself correctly because my son needs that. He needs that dad to always be there. I'm never going to get back here again. And the book is the roadmap back from the brink of death to thriving. And I'm not saying that I have all of the answers, but I have those 2 years worth of exploring that those answers are in there. And it's been a couple of years. Well, I guess I published it in February of last year. I published that. And even just in the last year and a half or so, I've started to think, okay, maybe I've got another, like a follow-on, because there have been more lessons learned and little refinements and tweaks and stuff like that, more things to pass on. I'm sure over time, eventually there will be more to share, but the people that I've coached, I use that book as kind of the foundational thought leadership. Mm-hmm. I put a copy of the book in their hand. I say, start reading this. Feel free to jump around, pick the chapters that feel most useful to you. And then we'll talk about the work you can do, right? They universally find it very, very helpful and relatable. At the end of every chapter, there's key takeaways and action items. It's not a self-help book. It's not a book that's just like, oh, well, feel better about yourself or whatever. It's, okay, you don't like the results you got. You don't like the person you've become. You've been broken. Whatever you're going through has broken you.
Let's lead again.
What are you going to do about that? How are you going to learn from that place to lead yourself? Because until you do that, you'll never be able to lead anybody else. So that's what the book's about.
Sorry, man.
It's a really long setup. But
no, dude, that was awesome, man. I'm excited to read it. Thanks for the copy, and thanks for coming on the show today, man.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate your depth as always, and just your vulnerability and openness. So thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, for me, this is just feels very much like the chat that we had over dinner. It doesn't feel in any way like performative. It just feels like, oh, we're going to sit down and have a conversation and record it. So the worst thing for me is in this chair, I don't know what to do with my arms and legs. So the whole time I've been like trying to get.
You look good, bro.
Yeah, okay.
You look good.
Yeah.
You look good.
But it's been a really fun chat, and I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, brother. Thanks for being here.